Welcome to Feminist Founders, a podcast that explores how to create a more equitable world through entrepreneurship. I'm your host, coach and journalist Becky Mollenkamp. Feminist Founders is a listener-funded podcast. Your contributions enable me to continue bringing you these important conversations without corporate advertising. To support the mission, head to feministfounderspodcast.com and sign up for a paid subscription. The link is in the show notes. Now, on to today's show. Welcome back. Can I mention just one more time how thankful I am to you for listening to this show and to helping me get the word out about it. If you haven't yet, I would love if you would rate and review to help the algorithm gods find the podcast and spread the word. But thank you so much for being a listener and for being here. And today, I'm really excited about the conversation that I'm going to be bringing to you with the founders of Marvelous Software, Jeni Barcelos and Sandy Connery. Marvelous, I love what they say, that they are change makers, female founders, feminists, and future thinkers focused on helping creators make money and transform more lives through online education. They're a course hosting platform. They specialize in people in the wellness industry. Jeni Barcelos is one of the co-founders. She's an attorney, a parent, and an artist. And she also helps with And She coaching, which we talk a little bit about in the episode, along with Sandy Connery. And Sandy had a 20-year career in footwear and gait analysis. And then she sold her $1 million brick and mortar retail business and clinic, and now brings all of that experience into what they're doing together with this platform, Marvelous, also with their work around coaching called And She. And they have a podcast by the same name. This episode's great. It's all about challenging the norms inside of the tech industry, which can be deeply problematic. There's so much really good, juicy stuff inside of here. Before we dig in, though, please take a minute to listen to this and learn about another wonderful, great show.
Family, it's your favorite queer radio personality, Anna Deshawn, and I bring you the Queer News Podcast every Monday by 7 a.m. Chicago time. I'm talking politics and following all these anti-trans bills. I'm talking culture and won awards for our Brittany Griner coverage, okay? I'm talking entertainment like the latest queer movies and queer television. If you are looking to stay in the know, pod into Queer News. We are Queer News done right. Listen inside the Cube app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Now let's get into this episode with Sandy and Jeni from Marvelous. Hello. Thank you both for being a part of this podcast and talking with me today. I'm really excited to chat and learn more about your journey in the tech space, because I know that is a space that historically has been pretty male dominated. So it should be interesting. I think you guys will have lots of stories to share. But before we dig into that, I'm interested to hear from each of you your relationship with the word feminist.
I can go because it's super simple for me. I'm sure Jeni will have a more complex answer, but to me, like feminists, to be a feminist simply means that you believe men and women are equal. And I don't understand the confusion around the word and why people would never, like I've seen recently someone that said they weren't a feminist. And I'm like, I just don't understand. It just means that we're equal. It is that simple to me.
And I'm going to just interject because for people who aren't watching but are listening, that was Sandy. So you can get used to their voices. And Jeni, you want to share your answer?
Yeah, so I think I have a slightly different spin on it, but just mostly that women should have the same opportunities available to them and the same like resources and potential that men have. And my relationship to the word feminist is a little complicated because for a lot of years I was in denial that we didn't. And it wasn't until I had like a series of kind of life experiences in my career that really didn't make sense logically that I realized how unfair and how unequal the world we live in truly is. So my kind of reckoning with feminism happened in my 30s.
I have a feeling some of those experiences may come up in what we talk about. We'll see, or maybe you can share more about those in a little bit. I want to talk about Hey Marvelous, which is a software company you guys started. And it's interesting because in my research and stalking of you both, I noticed that Sandy, your background is in kinesiology and
Pedorthics. Yeah.
It's feet, study of feet or working with feet. And Jeni, you're political science, environmental science, law. in all of that, there's not a lot of tech as far as training and background. Men are usually conditioned to believe that they can do anything, even if they don't have experience. We've probably all seen the studies about men applying for jobs when they meet something like 60% of the criteria. Yet women are often conditioned to think we can't do it unless we meet all the criteria. We have that exact experience. So what gave you guys the audacity of mediocre white men to think that you could start a tech company?
With respect to Marvelous, which is the tech company that we co-founded together, for me, I was a lawyer and I was teaching at a university, at a law school, developing kind of a new field of law. I can finally say that out loud with a serious face. And I was fundraising constantly. So it was climate justice work. And I was fundraising constantly from primarily men who had made a lot of money in tech. And I was beholden to their whims and desires. And it was astonishing to me as someone who was really an expert in my field, that I had to kind of listen to the directives of people who were not attorneys or kind of environmental leaders in directing my own work, because that's where the money came from. And at one point, right, when I had a baby, I was on maternity leave, I thought, well, I should just go into tech and build my own tech company so that I don't ever have to be told what to do in my work. So I'll just make heaps of money and then be able to redirect those resources into my climate work and my legal work. So that was extremely naive, but that was actually the reason why I wanted to start a tech company.
The commonality is being naive here. My story is I had a kinesiology degree in biomechanics, as you mentioned. I had a brick and mortar store, and I had it for I think 13 years, was in that career for 13 years. And I just started, as many of us do, to become quite bored of the industry, watching people walk, seeing the same injuries over and over again. I had a retail footwear store, so I had a lot of money tied up in inventory. And I just couldn't do it anymore. I just kind of tapped out, it was no longer challenging or fun. And so I started searching for what was the next step. And I happened to heard a podcast, which Jeni heard as well. We didn't know each other. And it was about how to build a software company. And so I really came at it from the lifestyle and the in quotations, passive income, work from home, all of these sort of benefits. And it didn't ever occur to me that women don't build tech companies, because I wasn't writing code. I was going to be the CEO and, find a problem and solve it with software and have this beautiful little business of recurring income. Right. And so that's what both of us did. We ended up taking the program that was discussed on that podcast. We were in the same kind of cohort, and that is how we learned not to code or write the software, but we learned how to research and find problems out there in the world and try to solve it by, creating a software solution and then hire out the actual development of it.
If we knew how difficult it was going to be, we wouldn't have done it, right? So the naivety is actually maybe what makes it possible to even start. I hear you both talking about wanting to make money off of it and maybe thinking it would be easy. And I feel like you say naive, but also I sort of think, why wouldn't you think that? Because that's so much of what's shown to us about tech, is that it's just this easy way to get in there and make lots of money. So of course you sort of might have bought into that because it's the narrative that we're given. What was the beginning process like for you? Where did you start to learn, maybe it was right away, or maybe it took a little while, that maybe that wasn't going to be the case?
I can say that for me, the beginning part was really not that hard because Sandy and I are both perfect students. And so we went through this program with almost 600 people in our cohort, and we were 2 of 6 that actually built tech companies out of that cohort in that first program. And because we were straight A, kind of overachiever types. And so of course we did it. We followed the system and we made it work. The problem was the course we took together was an immersive 6-month experience that taught you how to build and launch a tech company to paying clients in 6 months. So we did that. And then the hard part for me was like, okay, then there was no course after that of how do you scale this and how do you systematize this and how do you, like, you've created this MVP and people are using it, but what if too many people start using it and you need to rebuild it because the technology isn't sound? So like that was where things just like started to crumble, is as our company started to grow, I was not trained or capable and didn't have any life experience ever even really working for a private company, let alone a tech company. I had no idea. I was an academic and an activist. And so I had no idea what to do. And so I applied for an accelerator a little after a year in order, because that's what you do, right? You go to Y Combinator, or you go to another accelerator, you learn how to scale your company. And part of the criteria for getting accepted into the accelerator was having co-founders, because it's really, really unlikely to be you're unlikely to be successful as a solo founder of a tech company. Certainly at scale, you can't. You can only grow so big. So that's where Sandy and I joined forces. I asked Sandy to come aboard to our company as my co-founder, and she graciously accepted.
So once you started to realize the scaling was going to be difficult, you guys teamed up and you were in an accelerator. What did you get out of that program?
I joined Jeni one night when she was like, I just got accepted, but the condition is that I have to have co-founders, and will you be my co-founder? And I knew that the company that I had created from the course we took, Connectable, was a very small market and was never going to be millions and millions of dollars. Like there just wasn't, there's only 500 people that it was serving. So I knew there was limit. So figured I could do both. So I agreed to come on, and I was going to run the company so that she could participate in the accelerator, because it was in Seattle. So she had to physically go to an office downtown, and I would just start, taking over the inbox and handling clients and the money and all the things. And so my experience is that every day, well, not every day, but pretty close, she would call crying. She would be so emotionally distraught, like over and over and over again. We learned a lot, but it was not easy. And I will let Jeni talk about why it was so emotionally, so much turmoil.
For people who haven't been through the experience of starting and scaling a tech company, accelerators play this kind of pivotal role in the space where usually you come into an accelerator with an idea and a team, and you get a little bit of money in exchange for giving up some percentage of equity of your idea, really, of your new company. And then you get 4 months or 6 months or whatever it is in order to kind of incubate the idea and figure out how to go from there, usually raising more money so you can actually test out the idea. We were a little bit backwards because the system that Sandy and I had learned taught us to validate the idea and get paying customers and pre-sell the idea prior to creating it, because we didn't have any money. We both started our companies with no money. And so we came in having a customer base and a product that people were using every day. And so we didn't quite fit the mold of a typical accelerator business. And there was one other company in our cohort that had revenue. And so the first odd thing that I learned in that accelerator was that it was actually a liability to have revenue. It's much better to be pre-revenue and tell the story of how many millions of dollars and billions of dollars you can make than to actually have any money coming in, because the money that you have coming in as an early stage company is not going to look appealing to venture capitalists. And so that was a mind fuck for me. And I was so proud of what we had made and what we were doing, and to be sort of constantly kind of penalized for having done that was very challenging, because the idea is that you make your product free or very, very cheap in order to get market share, right? And then someday down the line, you figure out how to monetize what you've created. And then in the interim, you have this grandiose story of when you do monetize, you'll, be a unicorn worth $1 billion+ dollars. And so that was hard. And I will also just say being a female founder is hard. So when you're in an accelerator, what you're really learning to do is create a pitch deck and fundraise. So I was getting like daily practice with angel investors and with some bigger VC firms. And those experiences to do that as a female are uh, like, I would say, like traumatic and very, I would say would be a very rare instance that there was not kind of very real trauma associated with those daily experiences. So in one case, I pitched to a group of angel investors. I had business cards, and they were little tiny cute cards from moo.com with our logo on one side and my picture on the other with my email address and my role in the company and our website. And like a man had scratched a big X out over my face and written the word hate on my business card and handed it back to me as I walked out of a room. So like, in what other context do you have a person treating you like that? And my background, I had come from academia previously to this. So I was used to feeling some level of respect. I mean, like I was used to people being respectful to me. And I think that's just one example. I have a lot of examples, but that just illustrates sort of the weird dynamic, the sort of unnatural dynamic that people who have money have in this world, with, especially in the startup world. And yeah, I mean, they're terrible to guys too, but there's like a different level of, I think, unease that women have in those spaces.
I worked for a year as a community manager inside of a startup accelerator in a much smaller market in Des Moines, Iowa, but it was all men. And I think there was one female founder and me in a very male space. And it was quite an experience. There were great things and also some things that were very difficult. And I wasn't doing what you were doing. I was just managing community. But I know that it was, that there can be a bit of a bro culture inside of some of those tech spaces. You talked a little bit about with the VC part of it and the outward facing, but what about internally inside of the accelerator?
Let's talk about diversity. Sandy, do you want to tell our diversity story?
I went down a few times to be with Jeni and was able to attend some of the sessions in person. And the one time, this is actually the only thing I remember from actually being there, is that we were presenting something around marketing, and Jeni had done a lot of marketing. So we were presenting our sort of funnel, and I don't even think they knew what the word funnel was. And we had the big clipboard and we were drawing and stuff, and we were in an office with a glass wall. And on the other side of that glass wall were all the tables where all the teams, worked every day. And one of the co-founders of the accelerator said to us, really impressed with you two, so on and so on. But I really think if you are serious about fundraising, what you need to do is get a man on your team. You need to diversify your team. Like, you guys need a CTO, and it should probably be a guy if you're serious about fundraising. And I just remember like my eyes from looking at him just drifting up and looking through the glass at all of the male teams. And not a single one had a female on it. And I know that they were not being told the same information. And I do believe that the gentleman who said this, he said it with our best interest at heart. He was saying this as like truly good advice. Like, if we want this goal, consider diversifying, and as ridiculous as it sounds, like, I do think he had good intentions, but it was just like, I just remember glancing at Jeni like, what the hell's happening here? Does he not see all the men like behind him without any diverse team at all? It was just bizarre.
Well, that brings us to funding, because he's telling you need that for funding. And I noticed on your website, and actually Kelly Deals, who's going to also be a guest on the show, who introduced us, mentioned that you had a heck of a ride with funding. And so I'm excited to talk a little bit about that. And I noticed on your website that you said that you had to turn down traditional funding sources in order to stick with your values and mission. And so I would love to hear a little bit about your journey into funding as a tech company and as women, and what that experience was like and how it may have been different from what you've noticed with male founders.
I'm just going to say, like, first of all, we have a lot of copycat companies that have been well funded. So that's part of our difficult relationship with funding, is that especially in the post-pandemic era, we have had just like countless copycat companies pop up. Lots started by like young guys from either Stanford or Harvard, in particular, athletes who just kind of go and follow the path that's like easy for them, right? And they're literally just like looking at what we're doing and taking our ideas and getting funding to try to go take them bigger. So that's like a daily practice for me, like to just like absorb that reality and just try to understand like what are the circumstances in the world that kind of create that reality. Yeah, so we soft circled about $500,000 as we came out of that accelerator from an entire group of women. Not a single guy was in our round, and basically almost every woman we talked to joined our round. So out of like, I don't know, 60 people, we talked to like 6 women, like 5 of them were wanting to join our round, right? I can tell VC stories. Yeah, there's plenty of VC stories, but yeah, those were angels. We walked away from that round partly because I think we had a really difficult relationship with the person who would have been our lead investor. And, you know, it's great that women want to fund women, but there's also like this element of hazing that happens from some women to women like us. And so we just frankly weren't interested in that. I think especially for women who like kind of rose to power and wealth through traditional systems, whether it was Wall Street or kind of some of the older tech companies, there was just an amount of hazing is the only word that comes to mind that they went through, that they were sort of like wanting to do to us in order to prepare us, like out of love. It was like, out of love, I'm going to be very hard on you because it's hard to be a woman in this space. And so I am going to kind of put you through the ringer so that you come out the other side capable of continuing on. And I think that idea, like Sandy and I both like wrestled with that for many months as we were debating taking on funding or not, because again, we were making money without external funding. And so it wasn't like, oh, we have to bring in money or the doors closed tomorrow. We had other choices. So for us, I think like ultimately some of the weird energy between the investors and us, like we didn't want to buy into, but also there was some outdated notions of how to build a business. Like our lead investor really wanted us to open an office in downtown Seattle, to have fax machines and office furniture. And we were building like Sandy is Canadian and I'm American. We were building a remote company, a remote team back in 2015, 2016. And so like pre-pandemic, like we had a vision for the kind of business we wanted to grow. And it did not involve bringing a bunch of people to one place and showing up at an office every day. So that was like a real deal breaker, I think, in the end. Sandy, I don't know if you want to jump in on any of that.
The struggle was that there was a path in front of us that is traditional VC, and this is how you grow a tech company, and here are the rules, and here's how it's going to go. And we wanted that, but it like clashed with what we had been doing, what we knew about ourselves. It felt like if we took venture capital, we were following the rules, and, you know, we want to follow the rules because we're socialized as women and like, let's do the right thing. Let's like do that. This is how you're going to grow your company. You have to do these things. But oh my God, I don't want to do those things. I don't want to do anything she says. I don't want to talk to her. You know, it was like that. And again, like as Jeni alluded to, it was months of decision. We had this sort of soft circled round, and we had to decide, like, are we going to take the money and go down that path, or do we do something differently? And it was one of the hardest decisions, I think, that we had to make together in the history of our business, because we were basically turning our back on money and, you know, following a different path. But we ended up making that decision to turn that money down because of how it felt. It felt awful. It felt abusive. It felt controlling. It felt off. Like, what? Like I could just, no, like I just didn't want to do it. So we made the hard decision to do that. The other thing that became very apparent, and now looking back, it was like very obvious, but Jeni and I had both really jumped into online business, webinars and funnels and email marketing and all those fun things. And we had built, or she had, up until I came, she had done that. And as she said, had revenue in the company because of using these online marketing strategies. And that world, that venture capital accelerator tech world, knew nothing about it. Right. And now that's how we grew. That's like, as soon as we left the accelerator, we ran 4 webinars and raised the money that we needed to rebuild the platform. Right. And everybody was like, what? You did what? What did you do? And I was like, yeah, just watch us. We're going to go a different direction.
I know that feeling. And I think so many people can relate to that feeling. And we are conditioned to be good girls as women and to follow those rules and to not question them. So I know you said it took months, but what, especially knowing that like Jeni, you were going into this saying, I want to make money so that I can do good things with that money. And here's money being presented to you. How did you come to that place of making that decision? I know that it must have been very difficult. What gave you the confidence to say we can do this without that traditional money that's the way we're supposed to do this?
Sandy called me from summer holidays in a blueberry field and said, Jeni, let's not do it. I'm like, okay. That's what like we were both like teetering on that fence for so long that it was really, I feel like your idea, Sandy, to just say like, I believe we can do it another way. And I believed you. So I believed Sandy. And so like for me, that was it. So Sandy, where did your belief come from? Because mine came from you.
Well, I think that is the beauty of a partnership, because if I was maybe in charge all by myself, maybe I would have just followed the rules and taken the money and trusted that that's how it's done. And so this is how I'm going to do it. But I think that collectively, like together, we are so much stronger with our ideas and our brains and our personalities. And I don't really know. Like I think maybe it was more like, I don't want to do that. So let's go try this. Like there's more desire to not go down that money pathway with people dangling the $500,000 in front of us. Because I just had come out of a career that I wasn't, like it was great. It ran its course, and then I became very unhappy, and I didn't want to go into something else that like it wasn't fun. And it was really fun to work with Jeni. So let's just see. And I think I remember saying, let's just make up, this probably wasn't the exact words, but it was like, let's just do this differently and make up a new way to do it. Like that was what in that blueberry field when I was talking to you, it's like, let's do this differently and see what we can do. Can we forge a new path that no one's ever done before? And that felt so exciting to me. And I knew that Jeni and I as teachers and leaders and feminists and coaches could do it. Like I knew that, but we had not had any role models who were going to self-fund a tech company before, but why the hell not?
I love that. And I love that you mentioned like collective and support. And I think that's so important in entrepreneurship, especially for women as a whole, and in entrepreneurship, to not that going it alone mentality. It's so hard having someone else or a community of people you can go to in those hard moments to get that support. Because sometimes it is like, we just need some permission. We need someone else to validate how we're feeling and say, that's okay. And that is often enough to just say, okay, I'm not like the world out there is telling me I'm wrong, but I have this support system that's telling me what I'm thinking here is okay. So I love that you had that for each other. Well, let's finish the story before I talk a little bit more about just sort of tech on the whole, of what you did next. So you self-funded, you talked about webinars and raised money. How has it been going since? Have you been getting traditional funding? Have you been continuing to go it on your own? What does that look like?
So we just kept going and we kept growing, and we learned a lot about internet marketing, and we've grown a lot over word of mouth because we have a phenomenal technology product. So I think we built our business as if it were not a technology company, as if it were more of like a coaching business or something like that. Like we treated it a little different than I think, like a lot closer than people would treat a tech company. And then when the pandemic hit, we had like, I think both of us were at that stage, like we've arrived prior to the pandemic. Like we were quite happy with the number of customers we had and the revenue. Like it was a pretty decent, great business that didn't have a tremendous amount of overhead. And then COVID hit and we exploded literally overnight. And we went from a team of 2 of us and then 2 half-time dev team members and 1 part-time assistant to a team of 22 full-time people within 3 weeks. And so, yeah, our biggest funding engine was actually our customer base during the pandemic. So we were right place, right time. I like to say that we saw the future and we created it. Like we had been educating the wellness industry because that's our primary industry that we've worked in. We now serve all creators, but we had been educating the wellness industry since 2014, really about the need to take their teaching and practice online. And we had been working with the early adopters up until that point. And then all of a sudden the world shut down and literally every single person needed to catch up to the early adopters. And we had created the exact right platform. So we were like Zoom, like we exploded. And so that was a lot of our growth has happened there. We did have a small angel round post-pandemic because people were like literally throwing money at us. Like we could have raised any amount of money in like 2021. We did raise a small angel round to test some things. But we've raised very little compared to most of the actors in our space. And we did not go down the VC route, although I don't know how many VC firms we've talked to in the last few years, at least 50. And there's reasons that those conversations didn't turn into anything bigger. I think like we're very political. Sandy and I have a very specific way of thinking about technology, about thinking about the creator economy. And ultimately, like our best funders is our audience. Like when we make something good, people buy it. And so it's really hard to not just let that be what funds your company, because when you make something good, people buy it and you get to keep control. So my number one kind of like paranoia about building a company is not having control. And we have seen it play out. And I'm not going to speak for anyone else, but there was one other female founded team in our accelerator cohort out of 9 or 11 companies, and one other one. And that founder was pushed out of her company. And, you raise enough money, you dilute yourself in the equity on the board, and it's game over, especially as a woman. I mean, it happens to guys too, but like you get pushed out. And so I'm not ever willing to be in that situation, ever for 1 minute. So that's the real answer.
That's perfect, because you went exactly where I wanted to go, which was around you have a very specific view around technology and the creator economy. And that's a political view. And I know on your website, you say clearly that you're feminist, which I love. And so I'm wondering, because you mentioned on the website that you believe technology is a way to shape how we experience the world. And it's our mission to expand who has a seat at the table. So who's missing from the table in the tech industry? And what's your experience, or what is it that you believe that women especially bring to the table that's currently missing?
I just want to start with the creator economy. So women are the majority of the creators in the creator economy. Like that statistic is just a fact. And the female population makes less money than the male population of creators, right? So this is just like mirroring everything else in society. So women are making this stuff, but not making like a fair amount of money from what they create. Like look at the content on Instagram when you're scrolling, right? It's like so much content being created by women. And like how are women being compensated? So part of our vision with our platform is that we don't take the money. We don't take a single cent from anyone. Like they pay transaction fees and then they pay a flat fee to use the platform, like paying rent. But we don't take any of the money that people earn. And so many of the bigger creator companies don't follow that model. They either charge a flat fee like we do and then also a percentage, or if you're thinking about like the social media platforms, they're obviously just making money off of from advertisers, off of the content on the backs of the creators. And I think for me, this is such a new way of working in the economy. And thinking about investors and VCs, like this is one of those points of contention is how you monetize your people. And we will never, ever, ever take a percentage of the money that people make. And that is a sticky wicket for investors. And I just like, it's not going to happen. Like that goes against our beliefs. So that's one example of how our kind of feminist views show up in the way that we've crafted the platform. We also we don't gamify what we've made. And there's a lot of gamification built into most creator platforms. And I think like our role as like sort of the thing running in the background is to help a teacher or a coach or creator to bring value to their audience, not to like attention grab from those end users, which user is a problematic word, but we can just let that sit for a second. But like, that's not the point. And there's just so much like psychological manipulation that we could build into our tech that we actively have walked away from, that maybe would have made the product more sticky for some people, or maybe would have made us more appealing as an option. And yet our values prevent us from doing that. Like, I'm not interested in holding anyone's attention hostage for any reason. I don't care if that makes me money. Like, no, like we all have our line in the sand, right? Like I am not going to make money by putting poison out on the internet.
We have been criticized for that. And I think we probably could have made a lot more. I mean, we would have made a lot more money if we took a revenue share from our users, right? We would be a lot more attractive to a lot more people who would want to invest in us. And I think once we decided that Blueberry Field decision, like we're going to try to do it our own way, we've really stuck to that. And it just sort of snowballs the confidence. Like, no, we're willing to, the end goal is not to sell a platform for $100 million and be the next Uber-like unicorn. It's to create something in the world that impacts the lives of women who, and specifically allow them to make more money, to earn more money in this world so that their lives improve and that they have more safety and more choice because they're able to keep the money. And that doesn't really fly with, and they don't care about that. Investors, they don't care about that at all. So I think I'm proud of it, but it's not been easy. And there's, like Jeni mentioned, the copycat, like that was really hard to see that they copied us, turn around and raise $2 million.
Or $7 million or $25 million. I mean, our biggest competitor has raised in the post-pandemic years $550 million. Like these are sums of money that are like hard to even comprehend, right? And so like we're just not that brand. We're not that company. And we are not anti-money. Obviously, we both are in this to make money. It is a business. But I also believe we're forwarding this idea that you can make good money by doing good work. And that is a hard thing to do in our culture and in our economy. But yet we're doing that. Like, do how much is enough, I guess, is the big question, right? Like, do we have to be $1 billion company to be considered a good company? And we made that decision, Sandy and I both, that like, no, we don't need that unicorn status in order for us to consider that what we've made is good enough.
And I think what's so interesting is our clients or potential clients, or a woman who might be like thinking about taking her expertise online and, creating a membership or coaching or whatever it may be. And they're sort of looking out there in the landscape of the teaching platform options. And they sometimes come at us and say, wow, you guys are expensive. And like, we have to just deep breath, calm, because like, I want to just yell and scream. And, because those competitors have $550 million that they can put into marketing, that they can charge like a very low fee so that they can show the growth to the investors. And they're basically subsidized by the venture capital that's sitting in their account. We don't have that. And first of all, $125 a month is right now currently the price to work on Marvelous, which is not like you're running an entire freaking business for $125 a month. So in my mind, there's no world that is expensive. But there are companies that do similar work to us that are backed by venture capital and can underprice and undercharge and lose money on every single client. And that is not the business. Like, no other business in this world can operate like that. Like, that is not business. I don't know what that is. That's just messed up. So I just wish the public knew that. Like, you think that we're just like being expensive and taking all the money. No, we're actually, there's hard costs to running a lot of hard costs for every client that we bring on. And we have to charge accordingly because the only money we have is what comes into our bank account, like every other regular business out there in the world.
The model you talked about is this traditionally ego-driven, growth-driven model of tech. Yeah, which you put on your website. And I totally relate to that. And to me, it's like a house of cards. It's like it's built on sort of one promise after another, but nothing real.
Yeah, until it either collapses or they have to raise the prices because they ran out of their runway of funding, right? So like, oh, surprise, we're going out of business, which harms you if you're using the platform and you've built your business on it, which those people come to us in tiers and we try to migrate them over from our failed competitors. Or they raise the prices unilaterally, which is also happening all the time, right? Like, so you get used to, oh, I built my business and it's, $97 a month and I'm comfortable. Well, guess what? You don't get to keep that price when their investors say you need to return a higher return this quarter. You are just literally a little pawn in somebody else's game. Like, you are not you're the product, you're not the point.
All with the mission to get investors rich and to get that founder perhaps rich, right? And that's all with your pawn in the game of trying to make other people wealthy. Let's talk about the upsides, because I know walking your values can be very hard. It's something that we all aspire to do. And then when push comes to shove, when money comes to play, sometimes it can be hard. It's very hard to say, no, I'm really going to walk my values here. There are costs, real costs that you've talked about. What are the gains? What are the gains for you guys for doing that?
We have a company that we control and that we love. And I think the contribution, in whatever tiny way, to women out there, to women entrepreneurs, the women who have these dreams and these goals, that's the upside. Like, we've created something that is that is solid, that is beautiful, that is easy to use, and they keep the profit. And so I think the upside are the clients and the businesses that they create. It's beautiful to watch.
Yeah. And we've modeled something, right? Like, we've modeled it that in different ways possible. Like, we have created curriculum around self-funding. Like, this idea, there's, bootstrapped is talked about a lot in the tech space. Very few people actually succeed at bootstrapping, but we don't even talk about ourselves as having bootstrapped the company. Like, we literally have created and sold auxiliary things in our brand has created coaching programs and online courses and trainings and workshops and like you name it. Like we have built and sold things that are also of service as a way of self-funding our own tech company. And I think that that's a really powerful example to show to other women. Like we've had founders reach out to us for years, like women who want to start tech companies, whether it's in the beauty industry or the travel industry or what have you. Like we need women in all of these spaces. Like there's still hardly any of us in tech. And whenever I hop on a call with a future founder or someone's just getting started, I always talk about this self-funding idea, because you don't need venture capital money if you can self-fund, and you don't need to have a trust fund to self-fund. And Sandy and I found this other way, right? Where we could make, that first webinar series we brought in $60,000 in a week. And like, who can make $60,000 in a week? You can. You just have to understand how to make things that actually help people and then put a price on them, and how to use the internet. Like there's skills, but you can do it. And like, we've gotten really good at that. So I should also say, we split into two companies last year. So Sandy now is like day to day running one of our companies, and I'm running the other. And we're both co-owners of both. And we both work on both to some degree. But what we created and what's really been magical over the last 8 years of working together is now we're running two very successful businesses, and we're modeling how to do this. And I think like we need to see more examples of women making money by doing good work.
Tell me a little bit more about the two companies, because I don't know that I'm fully aware about that, and I'm interested to hear what that's about and like what was the motivation for that.
So we talk about self-funding, and what we did was we funded our software company by selling coaching programs. So we bundled up a year of coaching with us and a year of the software. And so we had all these packages, and that is what we sold, as our high ticket. And those large chunks of money went right back into the software to pay for marketing and developing and all the things. And then last year, we just realized that it was getting a little bit muddy, and that if we ever wanted to clean it up. Like, what exactly is the revenue from the coaching? What exactly is the revenue from the software? We wanted the software to finally be able to stand on its own 2 feet. Like, the revenue that comes in can pay all the expenses. So we went through the process of just legally creating a new entity for the coaching company. It's called And She. So And She is what I head up, and I run all the coaching programs through that. It's clean. We've got a new Stripe account. So all the coaching revenue comes in there, and then all the marvelous, the software company comes into different. So it's just clear, like we can see what we have. When it was just the two of us, it was fine. But now that we've got a bigger team, and, and eventually there will be an exit at some point, I would imagine. And we just don't want that muddled. Plus we put, as Jeni just described, a lot of like IP into these programs. And we want, like, we have a podcast, and we have courses, and we have, coaching concepts. We just wanted that separate from the software company.
I'm curious about the name, because I feel like there might be a story to that. What is And She about? What does that mean to you?
It started with the name of our podcast, really. So our podcast together is called And She Spoke. And I think we both like love, it's like a poetic phrase. We love the images that evokes and the thoughts that evokes. And like, we're both really multidimensional women. Like, we're both moms. We both have like advanced degrees and like interests and fields of study, and like we're just so much more than being one thing. And we wanted to have a place to sort of like to talk about that, right? So like, I think so often in our careers, we get pigeonholed as, like, for me, for a decade, I was like the climate justice person. Like, whenever I would go out to dinner or see anybody or speak anywhere, like every single thing directed at me was like a question about climate change. And like, that's just a huge part of my expertise and who I am, but it is certainly not all. And then for a long time, it was like, oh, you're the person that runs that yoga software company. And it's like, no, no, like that's such a limiting way of speaking about ourselves. Like, it's just not actually true. So we wanted to create a place, like our podcast is where we can kind of show up as our full selves, and we can talk about leadership, and we can talk about business, and we can talk about money, and we can talk about like women in tech, and like all these kinds of things that are interesting to us and that we think need to be talked about more. Is that space. So and she is like, and she spoke, and she built a company, and she's a mom, you know, and she made $100 million, and she loves race car driving. Like, we are both so, and she's a beekeeper. Like, Sandy and I want to be fully embodied. And so that's the brand.
I'm the beekeeper and the race car driver. Wannabe, just FYI.
And I love that because so many of my clients and just women I speak with have that feeling of like, especially in business, this idea that I'm supposed to be one thing. We get this marketing message. You have to have one message. You have to do one thing, be one thing, talk about one thing. And it feels so limiting for so many people because we are whole, complete people with whole, complete lives and so many other things going on. And this idea that we're just one thing is really, it doesn't feel good. It feels like so restrictive.
We've also worked that whole concept, what you just said, Becky, into the way that we teach marketing, because so many people like want to show up online in a way that's like, I am this thing and I teach this or I coach on this. And we have this method where we show you how to bring the ands in. Like when you go out and speak and stand up and be visible in your marketing, bring those interests in, talk about your beekeeping and your love of Formula One or whatever it may be, you know, and it makes you so much more interesting and distinct. And you're clearly telling potential clients out there that you are the teacher coach for them or not. And so we really we talk a lot about the word and, like your ands, like what else are you? And use it because it's really a beautiful thing.
And it's your magic sauce if you're in business.
I want to go back really quickly, though, to one more thing about money and finance and economy. And I know you talked about being feminist. You talked about your enough, like what's enough, which is my favorite thing to ask. I love asking that question for people because capitalism never encourages us to ask about enough. Capitalism is all about more, now, right? There's never that question about what's enough. And so when you think about like money, running a business, enough, the way you show up, how do you define or think about a feminist economy? How does that look different from, or a feminist business model? How does it look different from the traditional vision of running a business or having an economy?
I think about this a lot. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's just a much more sustainable and holistic way of seeing how your business fits into the rest of your life and into your values. So, like, what we learn about kind of in the neoliberal economy is that like you maximize profit and like you have this like growth for growth's sake. And that's literally what's rewarded. That's legally what's rewarded. That's what a board demands of a publicly traded corporation, right? It's why like Amazon is constantly buying a pharmaceutical startup or like any random thing, right? Because Amazon, the only way Amazon is successful is if it's growing, right? Even though it's like one of the biggest, most powerful companies that's ever lived, or not lived. That's a terrible Freudian slip, but like that's ever come into existence. Like it's not enough. It's literally never enough. Like modern capitalism is cancer. And so like, okay, so this is the world in which we live. So how do we decide what our boundaries are and what's okay? So like, I think about like regenerative ideas a lot. Like, what can I create? And I'm a founder. I'm like a serial founder. I'm like an ideas person. So what can I make that's actually going to add kind of more back into the whole than what it's taking? And I think that we've done that with both of our companies. Like to me, Marvelous is like net positive to the world, right? But it's also not a charity. I come from a nonprofit background as well. And the last thing on the planet I want to do is build another nonprofit. Like that model is so fundamentally flawed to me because it is just like the startup model is fed by the VC funding. The nonprofit model is fed by foundations, which are like way more problematic than anything we've talked about today, where those foundations get their money. And so like I am all about making things that are net positive and like creating more good. than what they take. And that's what these kinds of businesses can do. And I think if your listeners are small business owners, it's really easy to have a regenerative small business. Like, it's not hard. Like, you're not the person that's building a company to like grow indefinitely. Like, the trade-offs that requires for you personally and eventually for your client base or your customer base are probably bargains you don't want to make. So you're already probably on the right track. That's what I would say is like, that's why small business and entrepreneurship is like such a beautiful model.
And I think that just having worked with so many clients, I think sometimes as women, we will pull back on the money that we want to make, like some moral issue that it's like bad to go to like lean into capitalism, or bad or wrong to like want to make $500,000 or have $1 million business. And I just like, nothing's going to change if we all stay under 100,000 and all the men have all the freaking money and all the power and all the decisions and decide what's made or not. So I think a lot of our conversations in our communities and coaching programs are around like, it's okay to want to make 500,000 or 10 million or whatever it is. Because the only, like right now, we just have to face the fact that money gives you power, gives you choice. You can like turn around and invest. I think that's ultimately our dream together, is to have enough money that we can be the investors in other women's businesses to help them get started, because those things need to see the light of day. They can't fizzle out because someone's afraid to say out loud that they want $1 million business, or that they have a new idea, or, you know, it's hard. We get it. We have been there. And so I also don't want this like fear of I totally get the argument, but I don't want to keep women small. Like, capitalism is bad and making money is bad. Money is just neutral. And if we can buy into that, that's the only way we're going to change things.
One brand of capitalism is bad.
One brand of capitalism. Thank you.
What I've noticed with Feminist Founders is the big difference is the why behind the money, how they want to use the money. And that's such a different, like it's one thing to say, I just want to accumulate wealth because I want to accumulate as much wealth as I can because I want to hoard wealth. That's that toxic, very harmful form of capitalism, late stage capitalism. I think what I'm hearing from you and what I've noticed again and again is it's when women and other folks who have marginalized identities are amassing wealth, it's about how do I use that wealth in a way that is bettering the world, bettering other women, bettering my, other folks, trying to change the world. That to me is such a key difference. And I hear that's what you all are wanting to do. And you also mentioned on your website, I clearly stalked you, about entrepreneurship being a tool for liberation. And it says not just financially, but also mentally and spiritually. And I know you're giving people a tool to be able to make money, to be entrepreneurs, to get started, to sell things, to use their skills to build a company. Why do you feel so strongly about entrepreneurship as a tool for liberation? And what do you mean beyond just financially?
It's your freedom, right? Like, to do what you want with your time. But it's also like, there's no more powerful tool I've encountered like for self-actualization. It's not an easy path. Like, it's like going on a hero's journey. It's like, I'm going on this like spiritual journey that I've decided to go on, and I'm going to run into lots of tricky situations that I'm going to have to figure out how to navigate through. Sandy and I have made that decision to do that together in partnership, but lots of people choose to do it themselves. And it's just like, it's actually, it's so easy, I think, in our society to go through life and just sort of numb out and just like get through it and take like the easy path that's in front of you. Entrepreneurship is never that path. It is like, you're making something new in the world. You're going to like have to go battle this issue, and then you're going to have to go conquer that, and then you're going to have to like dig a tunnel over there, and like you are testing yourself at every stage of that process. And like it takes a certain kind of person to want to do that, and I think women are naturally good at that stuff. So like, take it on. And every time you like overcome something hard, you do something you didn't think you could, like the feeling that comes from knowing you did that. Like Sandy and I went through the pandemic with this company, and if I knew what was coming, there's no way I would have taken it on. But entrepreneurship you don't get a choice, right? Like you don't know what's coming, like what obstacles next in the video game. And like, because we both care so much about our company and each other and our community that we've created and our client base, like there was no saying no to it. And so I think it shows you what you're made of. Like we need more of that. Like we need more of that in life. Like I think as humans, as Homo sapiens, up until the Industrial Revolution, that's what life was like a series of like, not necessarily, like we're not talking about life or death challenges, but it was like, that's what it meant to be alive. And so like, I don't know, to me, it's like saying, I want to live my life in color and I want to live in a way that challenges me. I want to grow as a human being. And that's what entrepreneurship allows.
I just want to add to that. I think it's so important that women stand up and show their thoughts and their thinking and their ideas. Because for like centuries, women have been valued for what they look like or how they act and how quiet they are and just like seen, not heard kind of concept. And entrepreneurship is the opportunity for women to like step into their brain and their philosophies and their ideas and their opinions and build something that doesn't exist in the world and really be valued for their thinking and their intelligence and their originality, right? That is not, I know it's 2023, but it's not always the case. Like women still shy away from the spotlight and women still step aside for someone else to take the spotlight. And that is really a core teaching of what we do. And I think it's a very interesting path to show up when you have a company, to show up even when you don't want to, or when you don't feel motivated, or you don't feel creative, but you have to, right? It is a beautiful internal journey of really experiencing this for yourself and building something and benefiting from it. And then the other people, your clients, your customers having benefit from it. So it's easy to be very passive in life and it's hard to be an entrepreneur, but it's very, very fun-ish sometimes.
Fun-ish. I love that. The last thing I want to ask you about, you've already told me about how you're sort of walking your values in the way that you're delivering your services, the way that you are, selling your product and making sure that you're not getting into predatory marketing and, the way you're doing your funding and all of those things. What about internally in the way you're running the business for yourself, for your team, the way you get back to the community, those sorts of things? How are you walking your values as business managers?
I absolutely hate being a manager of anyone. So this is my like kryptonite here. I'm not comfortable with this role. I work so well in collaborative situations. I love partners. Like we're doing something together. When there's hierarchy, I personally find it revolting. And I'm still this many years into it very challenged by being anyone's manager. So I think I have a lot of growth there that I could do, but I also just try to respect people and I treat them, I feel like I treat our team more like collaborators than that, like people who work for me. And that's just my personal kind of style. And I've seen the problems that happen at times because of that. And Sandy's a little better at this than I am. So we just have our own kind of style, but I think it's okay.
Yeah. I mean, we just see our clients, our employees, and we don't have many. We've kept it very, very small. They are important to us. We see them, we hear them, we listen to them, we give them freedom. We're not super strict. We're not assholes. I don't think time off is important. Space, the power to make decisions themselves, all of that. And I do think I'm like maybe marginally better than Jeni with managing, but like a hair's breadth. Like it is the most challenging thing we do for sure each day. But we also can't do this without them. And I think we know that. And we have been very fortunate to gather a really incredible team around us that are like, I value play and I just want to laugh and have fun. And so the people we have right now do that for me. So I'm happy.
I love play. And you mentioned not working too hard, rest and those sorts of things, which I think are really important feminist values that honor the entirety of a person's life. What are the ways that you are doing that or that you're exploring? Because there's also, I love, Jennifer, that you mentioned your growth edges. We all have those growth edges and things that we're still learning and unlearning and working on in our own feminist journeys. So what are you doing now as far as, giving rest or time off and those kinds of things? Or what are you wanting to explore?
I honestly feel like we are just from a business perspective, we are still kind of normalizing coming out of the pandemic, because that was just an incredible, stressful, busy time for, like, it was hard. It was like the hardest thing we've done. So now I finally feel like we're in a place that the team size is right. And it's the first time, like maybe 6 months ago, it was the first time I was able to, like, just speaking personally, I was able to say, okay, Sandy, what are you going to do to play? And where are you going to find those moments of rest? Because it was all work all the time. So I feel like I'm just relearning how to play. And so one of the things I did last summer was take a beekeeping course. And I feel like we had spent literally years in front of our screens every single day. And I desperately want to reconnect with nature. And so I am going to be a beekeeper this summer. So I'm going to be responsible for 2 hives, like tens of thousands of little flying insects. It's completely like complicated and difficult and manual, like physically difficult. I'm so excited, but so terrified. So that really is going to be my like play, is to take care of these bees. And then I am also really considering how I get back into being more active, because I cannot tell you how stuck we were for the last, well, not stuck, like just trapped by the remnants of COVID in our business. And so I feel like we're just breaking out of that and sort of get to rethink, like, how do I want my life to look?
Hey, Jeni, I know that you also, I don't know if you currently are, but you have had an RV, an Airstream, I believe, that you've been more of a nomadic life. And that's something that traditional employment often doesn't allow for. So I'm guessing that maybe is a part of the way that you're doing things differently, but I'm curious if there's other things.
Well, so I was like falling apart and cracking at the seams. And so one time in the summer of 2021, I was like falling apart on a Zoom call, and I was like probably crying to you, Sandy. And I was like, oh, my husband had gotten a job offer in Connecticut, and our home is on a remote island in the Pacific Northwest. And I was like, and Sandy and I were coming off of like 18-hour work days, like 7 days a week, working for years, like working to the ground. I had long COVID, really bad. And I was like, should we go to Connecticut? Like, it's going to take a week to drive across the country and I won't be able to work. Like, I was like spinning out. And you asked me, Sandy, like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I want to go live in an Airstream with my family. And like, I want to work from Joshua Tree, and I just want to like travel for a long time. And Sandy said, you should go do that. And so I literally went and bought an Airstream. Like, maybe not everyone listens to their business partner and best friend when they tell them that, but I like literally went and bought an Airstream like for my birthday. And so last year we traveled for 3 months, my family and I, and it was so healing. And it was such a gift to me, because Sandy and the rest of our team really kind of like, I made a lot of calls like from the road, but there's a lot I couldn't do. Like, I'd be on a truck stop somewhere on the side of the road in Oklahoma trying to like call into a meeting. And I felt the gift of that. And so travel is really important to me. Currently not traveling, but I've taken up writing. Like I'm in a writing course, just like essay course, and I'm getting back to that. Like my dream was always that we write a book together, Sandy and I, and then also like when we eventually one day sell our company, like I just want to write. I have a lot of stories I want to tell, and so I'm not going to wait until then. And I don't know, like just working a lot less in general, like exploring hobbies. Like I love a very cool, weird hobby called Bargello, which I don't know if you know what that is, but it's like a weird 1970s Italian kind of needlepoint. There's an amazing woman named Brett who teaches Bargello on Instagram. Everyone should look it up. But I do like weird, non-fine art. I'm not an artist in that sense. I'm like a true crafter. So I make all kinds of weird stuff and I love crafting. So those are the things that make me happy.
Well, I love it. The goal, I think, of reimagining business in a people first kind of way, where we prioritize humanity, our own humanity, the humanity of our clients, the humanity of our team, the humanity of the world around us, and the way we give back. Like all of that to me is, how do I work less and allow for this fullness of who I am? You talked about, the fullness of who we are, and how do you allow for that? And it sounds like you're finding ways to do that those 17, 18-hour work days, that's, that is still sort of in that toxic, the ways that we've imagined what business has to look like. And I love that you guys are finding your way into what I think is a more feminist view of what business should be. It should support your life and not be your life. So that's lovely. And I love that you guys are, that's still, we all, for anyone listening, like we all have growth edges. We still all have those spaces where we're improving and learning and doing better. So I think it's great that you guys are exploring that for yourself. All right, let me finish up by asking you then, an educator or a book or a resource. You just mentioned Brett. Maybe you can give me her, like the full name of this educator, but it can be anything that has been really either transformative for you or just really helpful or just something that you want to share with the world. It can be related to tech, entrepreneurship, or it could be crafting. It can be anything.
I have a really dear friend named Sarah Fisk, and she has a podcast called the Ex Good Girl podcast, and it's all about people pleasing or not people pleasing. It's really good. And I think I don't know a woman that doesn't have a little touch of that. So that's a great resource.
So I will just say Seth Godin. He's a mentor of mine. And if you're, probably everyone knows who he is, but I just would encourage you to follow his work and his thinking. He's just kind of, to me, like one of the major thought leaders of our era. And The Icarus Deception is my favorite business book. So I always like to recommend that. It's something that I try to revisit. And I think it also kind of plays into kind of feminism too, because it's the whole moral is like, don't be like this, we're all kind of like afraid of flying too close to the sun, like the myth of Icarus, right? But like that's just like a false fear. Like really don't be afraid of like playing big.
Nice. I'll check that out and I will include it in the show notes. And then the last thing is to ask you about an organization that's doing good work that you would like to support. As a thank you, I like to support an organization that's important to both or either of you. And I will encourage the listeners to do the same. Now, Jeni, I know you mentioned some thoughts around nonprofits and that model.
No, I'm okay supporting nonprofits. I just personally think the model is like very broken. We could have a whole giant conversation about that.
And I know that you have an organization called 3 Degrees Warmer, correct? Or is that still going on?
I co-founded that organization, back in 2009, and it's a climate justice organization. So most of my extreme dislike for the nonprofit model does not come from my own nonprofit. I'll just say that, but it comes rather from the funding models and then some of the work that goes in the bigger organization. So I've worked in the past for a number of nonprofits. Like my first job out of college was with the Sierra Club. I'm not going to say any more on a podcast about that. Okay. And I guess I would just say one nonprofit or one organization that we've worked with for many years and supported as a brand is Yoga Behind Bars. And it's an organization that supports yoga classes being offered in prisons. And I think that there's a lot to say. I'm an attorney and I'm a social justice lawyer, right? So there's a lot we could talk about in terms of incarceration, but we need more resources like this in prison. And because our company has primarily worked in the wellness world, this was just the most beautiful kind of marriage of opportunities to see come together where we could support kind of furthering that programming in prisons.
That was my answer too.
I'm going to look up Yoga Behind Bars. I will include information about it in the show notes. And if you got something out of this episode and you feel inspired or motivated, you love what they had to share, I encourage you to also make a donation to that organization. And thank you both for being here. I really appreciate your time and I've loved learning from you.
Thanks, Becky.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Feminist Founders podcast. If you like what you heard and want to learn more, or if you'd like to support the work that I'm doing with the show, please visit feministfounderspodcast.com. There you can find out about becoming a paid subscriber for as little as the price of 1 cup of coffee a month, which will directly support my work. You can also find the show notes and find the bookshop.org website where you can order any of the books mentioned in this or any episode, which will also support the work I'm doing. The link to all of that is in the show notes. Thanks again, and I can't wait for our next episode.